Professor Powell. How are you
Hello,
doing today?
just fine.
Awesome. So I'm going to be asking you some questions about what are some of the best techniques for radio and about a bit of like what you've seen occur in radio over the past few years. Stuff.
Okay,
All right, awesome. Ready for your first question?
sure.
All right. So I know you've hosted 3 or more radio shows outside of your work for Gardner Webb, and you've been in countless others. Can you tell me about some of the challenges you faced, and if they've persisted into the modern day?
The problems I faced doing what? Did you restate that?
Um, the challenges you faced when you were hosting those shows, and if they've persisted into now.
The technology has changed over the decades. That's one of the biggest things. I started out, it was vinyl records on turntables. It was reel-to-reel tape.
Hmm.
Um, it was cart machines, things of that nature. We used Betamax videotape to record stuff off satellite. I mean, it was a very different technology in those days. Then came the CD, and the CD was I thought, what could possibly beat this? So we made the big switch from vinyl to CDs, and of course now everything is fully digital. Music distribution is mostly digital. There's a lot more streaming. When I first started, it was FM radio, and I still dabble in some FM radio, but for what I do here at Gardner Webb, it is streaming only, which is a whole nother environment. So some of the difficulties are would be competition. When
Hmm.
you're an FM radio station, you're in competition with other radio stations within your broadcast area. When you're streaming, you're really in competition. It's global because you could be anywhere, and you're also competing against or trying to get listeners when there's players like Spotify out there.
Yeah.
And, why listen to this when you can listen to Spotify kind of deal? So those are the challenges, I think. Um, One of the challenges of hosting a show, if I understand you correctly, is one of the things that you're asking about.
Yeah.
Um, you have to get used to talking on an open mic and not be shy in talking to an open mic. You have to think about what you're saying and how you're saying it. There's nothing wrong, depending upon, my phone is ringing, my apologies. I'm
You're all
going to, okay, sorry about that. So, where was I? What was I talking about?
depending upon what was I
Yes, you want to, generally speaking, you want to avoid as much regional dialect and accent as you can and aim for standard English, but there are always exceptions to that. Depends upon what you're doing.
yeah.
I've had DJs that I've worked with that have very rural Southern voices, and it works because of the type of music they're playing, the genre that they're approaching, that sort of thing. So I think the biggest challenge has been keeping up with technological changes, technological shifts. There's a steep learning curve there.
Yeah, I bet. Um, Building off that, is it easier to lead a show solo or have a co-host?
Um, I prefer to do it solo. I have done it with co-hosts. And most of the shows that I would say I would talk about, most shows I've been involved with have been music based. So your co-host is the music, if you will.
Yeah.
And but I have also interviewed people, of course, and that takes, sometimes it'll be one-on-one. Sometimes I'm interviewing an entire group of musicians or talking heads, experts in a particular field. But that can be very challenging in and of itself. I remember talking to a pretty well-established artist. I could tell from the get-go that as soon as he had walked in to our establishment here at Gardner Webb, he's kind of
Hmm.
like, why am I here? And so there
Yeah.
was this sort of, I'm too good for this kind of moment. But we ended up somewhere along the conversation, he talked about an interest he had in astronomy. And I have a little bit of an interest in astronomy myself. So we found this common ground. And the next thing I know, he's mostly known for his songwriting, but he's also done some actual performance as well, recording. Uh, we were clicking. Things were going really, really well. So much so that after the interview, he was giving out swag and signing stuff and just hung out for a while. And it was really only because I asked him a question that had nothing to do with music. I remember bringing in a group that was touring out of Canada on a Saturday, and I almost never would set one up for Saturday, but I was a
Yeah.
big fan of this group. So I set this interview up for this Saturday, and they came in, and I saw them through the window and they arrived, and they piling out of this minivan, and you could tell that they were tired, and you could tell they didn't really want to be here. And one of them came in with an injured foot. She had spilled hot tea on her foot and
Ooh,
burned it pretty badly that morning, you know. And
yeah.
the thing is, there were several people in the studio at the time, and we were all such big fans of their music. Before long, they were having a grand time. It was one of my favorite interviews that I ever did. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but I prefer generally to work alone when I'm just doing music recording. One of the things that I have never been attracted to are the sort of the morning funnies, as some people call them, or what
Mhm.
I grew up calling the morning clowns. I was never really interested in that. For me, it's more about the music, and so I've always been interested in that. Um, so that's that. I've done news segments on other stations that were interesting, doing the local breaks for NPR News, um, that sort of thing. I've done some in the past where, you know, I had to go to the sources and create the news piece, which you have to do even when you're doing like the local breaks for NPR News. You've got your sources and you've got a 90-second piece to fill or a 60-second piece to fill
Yeah.
for the local breaks. And the timing is really, really interesting. You have to kind of keep an eye on the clock as you're reading. And then you have to hit that mark so that you can pot up what's coming in over the satellite. Uh, I find those to be a little bit, I find it fun in the fact that it's challenging, but it can be a little nerve wracking. You don't want to miss that mark. So
Yeah. Um, Jumping off that, because you started talking about kind of more of the production side of radio entertainment. What's your favorite role to play? Like,
I think my favorite role to play, well, I enjoy being a host of a music segment
yeah,
and trying to introduce listeners to new recordings and new artists and new bands. I really like that kind of outreach thing, that sort of educational aspect
yeah,
to it. But other than that, probably my favorite thing to do is the music director role. If I can wave my magic wand, I might just be a music director at some station because you're the guy who um, listens to all the new music that comes out, and you decide what's going to get played and what's not going to get played. And what you do is you develop a sense of the music. And it's not just your personal, that's the thing you have to sort of divorce yourself from, is it being your personal opinion? It's the format you're working, it's any charts um, that you're reporting to, it's relationships with the artists and with the promoters of
yeah,
those artists that help you decide what you take a look at the charts. You decide, well, you know, everybody seems to be playing this. I kind of passed on it, so maybe I need to revisit that and see what I missed. That sort of thing. It's fun. It's fun for me to, because again, I'm discovering new music, new sounds, and
yeah.
I have I have I've never tired of that. I really enjoy that.
Yeah. Um, oh, shoot. Here we go. Sorry. So, what do you think it takes to make a strong radio personality? Since I assume that you've seen a lot of different like music shows over the ages or just radio in general.
Oh yeah, yeah. It radio people are like so many other people in the arts, within music, within theater, things of that nature. They're characters. They're quite
Yeah.
almost everybody I've ever met that's involved in this is unique in some way. Um, that's sometimes a challenge to work with, but other times it's just a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Um, it's hard to say that I don't think there is one formula that fits everyone. You say be like this. It depends upon so many different things. It depends
Mhm.
upon the tone and the feel and the genre of the station you're working for. And what you got to do is you got to fit within that. I've told a lot of students in audio production and announcing, if you want to go into radio, particularly if you want to go into uh, music radio, you might not get a job initially in a genre that you know much about or
Yeah.
care about, but you better figure out how to pretend. You better figure out how to fake it that you love fill in the blank genre of music and that
Yeah.
you're an expert in fill in the blank genre of music. Because if you aren't, an audience can hear it real quickly.
Yeah.
Working with students here at Gardner Webb, it's really interesting. Many of them come in and they know little to nothing about some of the artists on our playlist.
Hmm.
And, so you worry about them describing it correctly. You worry about them mispronouncing the name of a core artist. And as soon as you mispronounce the name of a core artist, everybody out there listens going, that's wrong. They don't know what you're talking about, right? So
Yeah.
you have to sort of work with that and try to educate them about that particular genre of music. Again, it's not about what your personal favorite music is. One of the things that I find people don't understand when they want to get into this, they think, "Oh, I'll be a music announcer and I'll get on, I'll play whatever I want to." No, you won't. In most instances, particularly in commercial radio, and
Hmm.
all my background is in non-commercial, so it's a little bit different. But
Yeah.
but even to some extent in commercial radio, you have a playlist that you follow. You don't select the music. You don't decide what order they're played in. Someone else does. The music director, programming director, people like that make those decisions. Some stations, particularly on the non-commercial side of things, I've found give some leeway to to the talent to pick some songs.
Yeah.
Um, One of the stations I've been involved with, I like to refer to it, I'm the only one that refers to it this way, but I call it the recipe. It's so many of these songs from this category, so many from this category, so many from this category in a given hour. Now, within that category, at that particular station, the announcer is free to decide what to play, as
Hmm.
long as they follow the recipe. And I find that works pretty good. It's kind of a combination of individual taste and also what is it that you're trying to accomplish during this time block.
Yeah.
Uh, if you're going to do morning radio, particularly in commercial radio, you're either going to be doing news or you're going to be doing personality based announcing where you better be funny and you better have a strong personality, etc. Um, if you're working a different shift, it may be different if you're working in the evening. But then again, so much of that is no longer done live.
Yeah.
I'm fortunate that some of it is done live, still on this non-com, this non-commercial end of things. But when you talk about corporate radio, so much of that is voice tracking and things are canned. And there may not even be anyone at the station, right? It's pre-recorded and then just thrown into the computer list, that sort of
Yeah.
thing. I don't know if that answered anybody's question or not, but there you
No,
go.
but did you actually hit on like three of my questions in one
Oh,
go?
good.
So,
Yep. Yep.
um, the other thing I wanted to touch on was how radio is aging. So, podcasts and Spotify
Mhm.
and that kind of thing are becoming really big.
Oh, yes.
How has that affected radio ratings in the recent years?
You're right. As of right now, radio is very, very, very strong.
Okay.
There are data points that indicate that more people on a weekly basis will engage with radio than they will with the internet.
Hmm.
Okay. Now that is changing over time. It's almost generational, right?
Yeah.
When do people listen to the radio? They listen to the radio during drive time, when they're in the car going to work or coming home. That's when they listen to the radio. Um, and there's definitely a generational component to it here. And that's where it's really, really changing. And that's where the traditional broadcast radio has got a challenge ahead of it. Younger people don't listen to traditional radio. They're listening to Spotify, they're listening to podcasts, they're listening to things of that nature.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean that the skill sets go away. One of the things I like to think about podcasting is it's just talk radio, but on demand.
Hmm.
Instead of, you have to be there when the show's on, right? You click a button and you listen to it anytime you want to. There's very little difference between a good podcast and good talk radio. So those skill sets are still there. One of the things I listen to Spotify, but one of the things I don't like about that model is there's no personality to it. There's no host guiding you through it, saying, guys, you need to listen to this. This is brand new and it's fantastic. Like this morning, guys, we found out last night that Dickie Betts, one of the founding members of the Allman Brothers Band, passed away at the age of 80. Let's play some Allman Brothers, right?
Yeah.
Spotify doesn't do that. Now you can go to Spotify and say play Allman Brothers, and they'll play Allman Brothers. But to have somebody break the news to you, sort of share that moment with you, that is not in the straight streaming model. You miss the local aspects of things
Hmm.
if you're only listening to Spotify. Who's playing in concert tonight? Who's playing in concert this weekend? What are the local venues? What relationships can you build with local venues and local media that you need artists, you need media that will play the artists, you need venues where they can show up and meet the audience. And you get those things, you can get a really nice, vibrant radio community going, music community going around a particular genre style of music.
How do you feel about some of the things Spotify is introducing, such as the daily drive? They've started, um, they make a curated playlist every day with new music as well as news thrown in from local stations using your regional information, and they'll throw in like stuff from artists as well.
I haven't dug that deep into Spotify being able to do that. It's wonderful to hear that they're moving in that direction. It's still big, it's still corporate, and being a non-commercial guy,
Yeah.
I like that real local feel from people that are
Yeah.
right down the road. One of my favorite stations in the area just had their fund drive. They have two a year, and this whole community comes together to volunteer to help
Yeah.
raise money, to give money. Restaurants give them food to pay the volunteer,
Yeah.
to feed the volunteers during the day, that sort of thing. They give away tickets to concerts and stuff all through the process. If Spotify can figure out how to mimic that, I'll like them even more. Again, there's this whole idea that, I mean, I have done for, I guess, about 20 years now. I teach a class, and one of the things we talk about in the class is the history of radio.
Yeah.
And I'll ask for a show of hands. How many of you listen to the radio? And today no one listens to the radio. No hands go up. I mean, maybe one or two. Maybe one or two will be listening to some NPR, or one or two will be listening to sports radio. But generally speaking, um, and the thing in a broader sense that I really find disturbing about that, we live in an environment now where people do not want to pay for music,
Yeah.
right? You don't want to pay. The closest thing you come to paying for music is your Spotify uh, subscription,
Yeah.
right? So I think we tend to value it less. We don't have any skin in the game. We didn't pay for that, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't buy music. Nobody buys music anymore. You
Yeah.
go and watch a YouTube video, or you plug into Spotify or something of that nature. And I think it's very interesting. When I was growing up, we did this thing that I've heard referred to as deep listening. You buy that album and you go home and you put it on your turntable or your CD player.
Hmm.
I'm going to go back to the vinyl days. You put it on your turntable And you put your headphones on and you sit there and you listen to it all the way through. You're listening to every note. You're not multitasking. You're
Yes.
listening to the music. And you also have that album cover with that album art in your hand. And you pull out the liner notes and you read and you look at the extra photos and all this stuff. Growing up, that was such a pleasure to me. And the sure, you could spend all day going to websites and social media sites and stuff of that nature. It's just different and it's
Yeah.
distracting. It's not the same as that deep listening that we used to do so much.
Yes.
I'm sure I got way off track there, but that was
No, 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 no. It's really helpful and it's really insightful into how the music industry and radio has changed a lot.
oh yes, oh yes.
Um, Going back to some more like specific radio questions, would you personally prefer people to get higher education it for radio broadcasts if they were deciding to be a broadcast personality or broadcast personnel in general?
It's there's no one size fits all kind of
Yeah.
answer to that. Working in higher ed, yeah, sure, you need a college degree. Go get a college degree. Get that degree in something. Get it in communication.
Yeah.
There are broadcast schools. There are community colleges, broadcast programs.
Hmm.
Um, it depends upon what you want to do,
Yeah.
and it's hard to find a job in broadcast radio now because so much of it is automated, so much of it is computerized, so much of it is networked that
Yeah.
there are fewer personnel involved in actually the doing of it. It still exists, it does happen, but it is harder. My recommendation would be to, if you really want to do this, you might want to be willing to move a lot because you'll
Yeah.
start in a smaller market, probably in a genre you don't know anything or care anything about, and then you work your way up. You build from there. If you really want money, you need to go into sales and sell advertising for commercial radio. That's probably a better way to make good
Yeah.
money. Promotions. There's a lot of stuff other than being on the air. There's the engineering aspect. There's lots of things that one can do in the industry. But being able to speak well, being able to speak on any given topic, working on your vocal delivery, all these things I think help no matter what you do.
Yeah.
So the answer to your question is sure, absolutely. I'm gonna recommend that you get a degree of some sort, that you go to college, that you pursue the higher education of things, because the environment changes constantly. It's going to continue to change, and just sort of developing those uh, problem solving skills, get that knowledge that you can build on, learn how to learn, that sort of thing is
Yeah.
always going to benefit you. But in addition to that, I think anyone with any interest in this kind of field should do it. Volunteer, show. I was talking about the radio station, which is down the road here, that just had their fund drive. Go there and say, I want to help with the fund drive. I want to do this. I want to man a booth at a concert or a festival. I want to do one of these things. And maybe eventually I can get to the air. I'll volunteer to fill in when
Yeah.
somebody's out, etc., and get experience. If you're young and you're just starting out, don't worry if you get paid for it or not. Just do it, have the
Yeah.
experience. And it's not just traditional, radio or streaming radio. Anything where you're working with a soundboard, you're plugging things in, you're working with microphones, take every opportunity to do it. And that
Yeah.
way, when it comes time and you've shown up and you're like, okay, I kind of like to work here, they may ask, okay, what's your educational background? But they're probably going to ask, what can you do? And if you can show them something you've done, something you've produced, something you've made, um, here are my skill sets, then you're way ahead of the game.
Awesome. Awesome. Um, Jumping a bit back to the podcast bit, have you been a part of any podcasts? I was, I
I
couldn't find
have
anything.
I haven't done a lot of podcasting recently, but I have in the past done some stuff. I've got friends who do movie review podcasts pretty
Yeah.
regularly, that sort of thing. At one point in time when the radio station was not under academics, it was under the marketing branch of things here at the university. We did a lot of interviews with people. At first, we didn't call them podcasts because nobody did.
Yeah.
You we would usually, sometimes we would do them live, sometimes we would record them and play them back later. But now with the whole podcasting thing, you have the opportunity to basically archive them. And again, it becomes talk radio on demand.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've done some, need to do more. I haven't done any of that in a little while.
What, in your opinion, since you said that podcasting is so similar to talk radio, what, in your opinion, does it take to be a good podcaster slash talk radio host?
It takes work is what it takes. I've
Yeah.
talked to a number of podcasters, if you're doing, it depends upon the format, but if you're doing 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30-minute podcasts, you don't knock them out in 10, 20, or 30 minutes. You put hours into them.
Yeah.
You've created content. You know how that
Yeah.
goes, whether it's a little video or whatever. Oh, it's only a 2-minute video. Well, yeah, I put 2 hours of work into that 2 minutes, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of people don't think about that. A lot of people think, oh, I'm doing a podcast. We're going to talk about sports. I know a lot about sports. So let's get a couple of friends together, sit down and talk about sports. And there are lots of podcasts out there that are exactly that. That's what they are. And depending upon the individual skills and personalities, it can work.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, you got to plan it out. You got to think what you're going to say. You got to do research. Maybe you got to write a script.
Yeah.
If you're co-hosting, who's going to say what? How are you going to approach this? It takes rehearsal. It takes all kinds of work. Yeah, we had a podcaster visit the university, spoke in the library. I think that was last semester.
Yeah.
He does a podcast called Carolina Haints. It's based on supernatural ghost stories, things of that nature from the Carolinas.
Mhm.
And he would talk about how, it can be, you can easily put 2 or 3 hours worth of work into a 20, 30-minute podcast. He does a lot of scripting
Yeah.
and a lot of research and a lot of those kind of things. So he's not just going off the fly. He is reading from a script, got to put the music behind it, any sound effects, all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. Yeah.
Thinking
It's a lot of work. Like anything worthwhile, it's work.
Yeah. And then this last question is going to be a bit more of a fun question. Why'd you get your master's in history?
As I absolutely love history. I mean, absolutely. I remember the first time I knew that I loved history was in the 7th grade.
Yeah.
A teacher came in and asked a question about the Alamo in Texas. And I was the only student in the class that had a clue and knew how to answer it. And I remember I had students coming up to me, fellow students, classmates saying, how'd you know that? I'm like, how'd you not know that? I mean, I don't know why I knew that, but I knew that. I loved history. I decided I couldn't do anything with it.
Yeah.
This was when I was young. I decided I couldn't do anything with it. So when I first went to college, I was studying business because I thought that made a lot of sense. And for many people, it does. But for me, the main thing I learned was I wasn't interested in pursuing a career in business. So when I went to graduate school, I said, what was it I really loved? Well, it was history. So I decided, well, at one point I came back to college to get certified to teach high school history. I was going to teach high school history.
Mhm.
And that taught me that I didn't want to teach high school students. Just didn't want, it wasn't for me.
Yeah.
And I said, if I'm ever going to teach, it's going to have to be on the college level, which means a master's degree. So eventually I went back to school and got the master's degree. And I have taught history. A lot of the communications studies classes that I teach are basically the history of mass media. And so it works. It helps me. So there's a lot, it's a curious overlap because as a student at Gardner Webb, a friend of mine called me up and says, there's a work study job at the campus radio station. Are you interested? And I said, yeah, it sounds like fun. And I've never left radio. I've done other things, but while I was doing those other things, I was still doing radio. And so this is my 40th year in radio. Whether it's broadcast or streaming, I've been doing it for 40 years. And, I've had people say, if you could only do one thing, if you could only do radio and you could only teach, which one would you do? And I said, that's a false question. I can do both and I want to do both. I enjoy doing it. So Over the years, I used to teach for the social science department here as an adjunct history instructor. And then at one point, I was still doing that, but I started adjuncting the comm studies classes, and that grew into the full-time piece, just as the station was changing from broadcast to streaming. And so it all worked out really, really well. I have enjoyed my time here at Gardner Webb University. I like to tell the story that every semester I look forward to the start of the semester. Always look forward to the start of the semester. Now, by the end of the semester, I'm looking forward to the end of the semester, which is where we're at now in this semester. So I'm looking forward to it ending. I'm looking for sort of a different schedule. I'm 12-month employee because of the radio station.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to the summer. But I'm also already starting to look forward to next August and another class of students coming in. Exactly. I always look
Yeah.
forward to the summer. Yeah.
Awesome. I think that's about all of my questions. I
Okay.
really appreciate it.
No problem.